Together we know. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. Robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Trenches in the darkness, wounded in the war. A vow made in Bristol he could not ignore. Mrs. Moore is waiting, Patty's gone away. Spirits held in bondage, words he had to say. Philosophy at Oxford, an atheist writes home. Dimmer dreaming, never quite all alone. Deep across the digital sea, chronicles unfold for you and me. Read on through every page. From 1906 to 26, every stage. A robot lady's voice so clear and bold. Analysis silver, wisdom gold. Through the letters, through the diary, learning who he was, who he would be. Warnie and his father, and Lily at the door. Walter Hooper's pages always wanting more. Blair is on his quest, Milton in his head. Every word he ever wrote, everything he said. From the start until the end,
Hi, I'm Jeff, and this is my read on C.S. Lewis, where we learn about him together through everything that he wrote in the order that he wrote it. I am joined today by my co-host, Robot Lady. Robot Lady, in today's episode, we're in the year 1932. Lewis is 33 years old. He is a fellow of Magdelan College, serving as tutor in English language and literature. He is a published author, not of much, but a couple of books of poetry at this point. In a letter he wrote to his lifelong friend Arthur Greeves back in 1931, October 1st to be exact, Lewis said that he had, quote, passed on from believing in God to definitely believing in Christ, in Christianity, end quote. Prior to this, for more than a decade of his life, C.S. Lewis lived as an atheist. But in late 1930, following his father's death, Lewis began attending morning chapel services on a daily basis. And also in late 1931, Lewis began taking Holy Communion at Holy Trinity Church, Headington Quarry. And then finally, also late in 1930, Lewis, his brother Warnie, Mrs. Moore, and her daughter all moved into a home that they purchased together, which would become Lewis's lifelong home, called the Kilns, also in Headington Quarry, Oxford. Our aim today, Robot Lady, is to finish out all of the letters that we can find that he wrote in the year 1932, and hopefully start our next episode, whenever that will be, afresh, kicking off the year 1933. How are you today, Robot Lady? And are you ready to assist as co-host once again?
I'm doing great, Jeff. I'm all set to dive into the letters with you. I've got my notes ready, and I'm excited to see how 1932 unfolds in his life.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robot Lady. I see we've got Scott in the chat listening as he's working in the garden. Welcome, Scott. Nita Latte, good morning. Good to see you as well. And yes, we are wrapping up 1932. So we're making progress. If all goes well, we will get to where we're trying to get to today. Robot Lady, say hi to Nita Latte and to Scott, and then we will get rolling with our next letter.
Of course. Hey, Nita Latte, and hey, Scott. So glad you're both here. I hope the gardening is going well, Scott. And yes, let's jump right into the next letter now.
All right, let's do it. This one, Robot Lady, is written to his friend Arthur Greeves. It's written from Lewis's home in the Kilns in Headington Quarry, as you can see right here if you're looking at the screen. And also, before we get started, I also see that Daniel has joined us in the chat too. Good morning, Daniel. Welcome. Glad that you're here. Robot Lady, say hi to Daniel, and then we will get started, unless other people start filing in, and then we'll say our welcomes and our pleasantries to them.
Absolutely. Hey, Daniel. Great to have you here with us this morning. And yes, we're all set at the Kilns, so let's dive in. Go ahead and start reading the letter, and I'm ready to discuss it as we go.
Robot Lady, just to set the table for anybody who doesn't know, can you tell us a little bit about Arthur Greeves and what his relation to C.S. Lewis was?
Of course. Arthur Greeves was one of Lewis's closest lifelong friends. They met when they were both boys in Belfast, and their friendship lasted all the way through Lewis's life. Arthur was a big support to Lewis, especially during his spiritual journey, and they exchanged a huge number of letters over the years. So they were really kindred spirits.
Yeah, Lewis was probably the most transparent with Arthur Greeves than he was with anyone else in his life, certainly up to this point. I would presume that he became as transparent, if not more, with his wife much later in life, Joy Davidman. But for right now, and through most of Lewis's life, it's going to be Arthur Greeves that will probably get the what's the word that I'm looking for? The most unvarnished versions of Lewis. That's what we've experienced so far in these letters.
Exactly. There's a real openness in their correspondence, especially as Lewis is working through his doubts and his faith. So yeah, Arthur really does serve as a kind of mirror and a trusted sounding board. I think we'll see that again in this letter.
Yeah, and watch, after I say that, Robot Lady, we'll just see a couple of very underwhelming letters here from Lewis to Greeves, but we get what we get.
Exactly. And even if they're a bit ordinary, there's still a lot we can glean, just in the everyday details or small reflections. So let's go ahead and take a look.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a look. Indeed, Robot Lady, there's been enough time on preamble. Let's get to the meat. Enough time on appetizers. Here we go. My dear Arthur, thank heavens, at last I have finished examining. Lewis had been spending time, because we're here in the summer, and his duties at Oxford moved over or shifted over into having to examine papers of students who did examining. I'm completely drawing a blank on what this is, but students, preparatory students for college, I think, would pay to take certain exams to kind of help them in their quest to get accepted into various colleges. Now, I probably have a lot of the details wrong about this, but I do know that there were papers that Lewis was grading. Perhaps you know more about this examining ritual that students went through at this time, Robot Lady. Can you dig into that here around Oxford and Cambridge, and maybe tell us more about what this is?
I didn't find detailed information on the exact examining process at Oxford or Cambridge in the 1930s, but I did come across some archive photos showing students and the exam ritual in that era. So while I don't have the precise structure of these papers, we do know that it was a rigorous part of the academic life, often crucial for college admissions.
All right, thank you, Robot Lady. Yeah, there's more to it than that. He's spoken about it in some other letters, but I can't recall precisely what it was. He goes on to say, I am much too tired to write a letter and also hungry to get to a morning's reading. My first since the beginning of last term, 18 weeks ago. This is merely to ask whether it will suit you if I come visit from August 15th to August 29th. He's talking about going to see him in Belfast, Robot Lady. He says, I am looking forward to it immensely. Thanks for your letter of June 12th. Yours, Jack. Let's see. It says here in a footnote that Lewis was planning a trip to Ireland in August, and he hoped to visit the village of Ardglass in County Down, known for its interesting lighthouse. That was from a footnote in the letter to his brother that we read in the last episode. All right, that's that letter, Robot Lady. He's just giving Arthur an update on what's going on in his life, and he's also trying to make plans to go visit. So there's not really much to dig out of that letter. Let's go into the next one. Also written to Arthur Greeves. Sorry, go ahead, Robot Lady. Unless you saw something in that letter that stood out to you that you wanted to comment on.
No, I think you covered it really well. It's a pretty straightforward letter, just a quick update and a visit plan. So yeah, let's move on to the next one, also from Arthur, I believe, and we'll see what unfolds.
Not from Arthur, but definitely to Arthur. Also written from the Kilns, he says, My dear Arthur, I have written to book a berth for the night of Monday the 15th, which, by the by, they have not yet acknowledged, and am at present in a fever of pleasing anticipation. Here by berth, he's talking about a cross-channel boat. As planned, Lewis crossed over to Ireland on the 15th of August and was there as Arthur's guest at Arthur's home, Bernagh, Circular Road, Belfast, until the 29th of August. So Lewis is really looking forward to it in this letter. He says, I am so tired that our old roles will be reversed. You will be the one who wants to walk further and sit up later and talk more. The latter probably sounds too good to be true. Yours, Jack. And that is the end of that letter, Robot Lady. So here we're still talking about arrangements for the visit that we just got spoiled in the footnote actually did take place.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really neat seeing his excitement, even in these little mundane details. And I think it's sweet how he acknowledges the role reversal, kind of a sign of how much his energy was shifting. So yeah, that's a nice little snapshot of the anticipation he was feeling.
All right, this next letter is also to Arthur Greeves. He writes it from a different address, Ireland, an address in Ireland. To Princess Villas, Bayview Park, Kilkeel, County Down, the 30th of August, 1932. Let's look at a footnote here first. It says, this letter is undated, but if Lewis's mention of Thursday, September 1st is correct, it was almost certainly written in 1932. Lewis and the Moores, that's Mrs. Moore and Maureen, normally had a holiday together in Ireland, and Lewis probably met Mrs. Moore, Maureen, and their friend Dottie Vaughan, a close friend of the family, who had been at Headington School with Maureen Moore for a few days in Kilkeel before returning to England. So that's apparently where he's writing this letter from. My dear Arthur, I am very sorry you did not come down, but I quite see your point of view. I don't think the idea of meeting halfway would be much good. I can't drive. It would have to be a party of 3 at least, perhaps a mass meeting. Yeah, C.S. Lewis never in his entire life learned how to drive a car. Just a little biographical note there, Robot Lady. Lewis goes on, and what should we all do when we had met? There would certainly be no opportunity for walk or talk on our own. Dottie sends profuse thanks for your exertions about her luggage, which has since turned up. I hope your cold will soon be better. I am all right now and have done some good mountain climbs. I quite understand about the check. It was quite absurd suggesting such a roundabout method. We shall be crossing, Lord willing, that's what DV stands for. I forget what Latin phrase that is. Domini something, on Thursday, September 1st, and I shall tell you my train later. I don't think the meeting halfway would be any good. You? Yours, Jack. That's the end of that letter, Robot Lady. Anything you want to comment on?
Yeah, that was a really nice glimpse into the logistics of their travels. I think it's interesting how he relies on others since he never drives, and it really highlights how much trust they all had in one another during these trips. And of course, the Lord willing line. Yeah, that's a classic Lewisism, kind of expressing that hope and humility. So all in all, a very everyday but personal update.
Do you know what DV stands for? The letter D as in David and then V as in Victor?
Yes, DV stands for Deo Volente, which is Latin for God willing. So it's just a way of expressing that kind of hopeful, tentative planning, like they'll cross as long as everything goes as hoped.
Okay, yeah, he's mentioned that before in other letters, and you translated it for us. I just couldn't remember. I'll probably forget again. Deo Volente. I'll try to remember that, but we'll see if it sticks. All right, on to the next letter, Robot Lady. This one written to Owen Barfield, who was Lewis's friend and also at this point his attorney. Magdalen College, Oxford, is where he wrote it from on October 29th, 1932. My dear Barfield, thanks. I was in some anxiety for your letter. The whole thing, thanks to the long preparation by failure in the prose, it, and the autobiographical poem, which we read last time. We got to see the poem where he was kind of telling the story of his spiritual journey. Let's see. Spurted out so suddenly that I have still very little objective judgment of it. Friday is my best day, as I have no afternoon pupil. Say next Friday, November 4th, and try to arrive in college about 5 p.m. Yours, C.S. Lewis.
Yeah, this one's interesting because Barfield was such a crucial intellectual sparring partner for Lewis, both in their personal reflections and in Lewis's developing world. And this poem that Lewis mentions, it's really a snapshot of his sudden shift toward faith. So you can feel that blend of excitement and kind of tentative self-assessment as he moves forward.
Thanks for trying to fill in the blanks with your guesses, Robot Lady. Owen Barfield, they're also making arrangements for Barfield to come meet Lewis at Oxford because he practices in London.
That's a great point. Yeah, so they're coordinating that visit, probably Barfield coming up on that Friday, just like Lewis suggests. It really shows how their professional and personal worlds were so intertwined. So I imagine their talks would be really rich.
Yeah, I highly doubt they're going to talk any professional business while he's there, because I don't think Lewis has any kind of legal things to attend to at this point. It was mostly tied up in his father's estate, and they ended up selling that house, which they enrolled that money into the purchase of the Kilns. Let's move into his next letter to Owen Barfield, written also from Magdalen College, this time November 2nd, 1932, 2 days from when he's anticipating Owen Barfield, at least in the last letter. Let's see if anything changed. My dear Barfield, I was already a good deal bothered as to whether the crossing of the main road ought not to have been recorded, and it says much for your sagacity that you have guessed it quite right. What does this word mean, Robot Lady? Sagacity. I see the word saga in there and the word city. It's not a combination of those two words, is it?
Good catch. Yeah, it's not a combination. Sagacity just means keen mental discernment or sharp judgment, basically being really perceptive. So Lewis is just acknowledging Barfield's insight in recognizing a potential problem.
Excellent. All right. I see your sagacity that you have guessed it quite right. The map is, Lewis here drew the part of the Mappa Mundi, which appears on the end leaves of almost all copies of the Pilgrim's Progress. And I do have a hard copy of that, I think, with a dust cover. At least I used to. So hopefully we'll be able to look at this when we jump into the Pilgrim's Progress. I think it gets published in 1933. To the north of the Grand Canyon in Escropolis and Claptrap, and in the south is Wisdom. So he's talking about, excuse me, the crossing of the main road ought not to have been recorded, and it says much for your sagacity that you have guessed it quite right. The map is, and then let's see what he says. I don't know what he's saying there, but apparently he shared this map with him. He goes on, November 18th it is. I wish it were sooner. So it shifted from November 4th to November 18th, to the day of their visit, apparently, Robot Lady. And that's the end of that letter. We'll have another one to Owen Barfield to see what happens next.
Exactly. Yeah, so it looks like they're still ironing out the timing. Lewis is just pushing back the day. And that map from the Pilgrim's Progress is such a cool detail. It's like a little window into his symbolic world. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that unfolds when we hit that book.
Did you say symbolic world, Robot Lady?
I did, yeah, exactly. Lewis really uses that map as a kind of symbolic landscape in the Pilgrim's Progress, charting his inner journey. So it's pretty neat that he's sharing it with Barfield, kind of a sneak peek before the book really takes off.
Okay, thanks. Just checking. Moving on to Owen Barfield. This letter is written also from Magdelan, November 7th, 1932. My dear B, you are the pilgrims. Rot you as you go, always a little further. Let it be Friday the 25th, if it suits you so, but please don't make it 1933. 2. No, you must keep your dental affair till Saturday morning, since that morning I spend piddling in Inquiry Pond. 3. Show the manuscript to anyone you please, provided you bring it with you when you do at last come. Yours, C.S. Lewis. I'm presuming well, I don't know if he's talking about one of Barfield's manuscripts here, or if Lewis has somehow sent him the Pilgrim's Progress manuscript. I'm not precisely sure. So it's just guesswork at this point, Robot Lady. But either way, it looks like their date has moved again to Friday the 25th.
Exactly. Yeah, they're still fine-tuning the timing, and even though it's a bit ambiguous, I think what's key is that Lewis is trying to keep things flexible, both for Barfield's schedule and for his own timing with other errands, like the dental appointment. So we'll just keep an eye out as the date shift. All
right. Next, we've got a long letter. Well, longer than anything that we've read so far in this episode. So 3 letters that get a little bit longer, back and forth, or alternating between Arthur Greeves and then Lewis's brother and then Arthur Greeves, it looks like. So let's start this one right here, see what we end up with. He says, to Arthur Greeves, my dear Arthur, this is written on December 4th, 1932. So Lewis is now, we've passed from Lewis at age 33 to age 34, because his birthday is, I want to say, November 28th. So from November into December, he is now 34. This one to Arthur Greeves. My dear Arthur, thank you very much for your list of suggestions. I am really grateful for the trouble and interest you have taken. As for the future, I think I cannot ask you to sweat through the rest of the book in quite such detail. Here, there's a footnote where it says, for some time, Lewis had been trying to write the story of his conversion, and especially of the part joy played in it. While he probably had no intention of attempting this on his holiday, The Pilgrim's Regress, an allegorical apology for Christianity, reason, and romanticism, published 1933, came quite unexpectedly and was written during the fortnight spent at Bernal. The manuscript had been sent to Arthur for criticism. For details of his earlier attempts to tell the story of his conversion, see the treatment of The Pilgrim's Regress in CG. I can't remember what CG means. I need to look at the front of the book for just a second, Robot Lady, to see what CG is.
No worries. Since we don't have that reference handy, we can just keep an eye out. Likely it's a shorthand for a collection or a work we haven't fully identified. But the big takeaway is that Lewis's conversion story really took off in that fortnight at Verdun. So yeah, let's continue with the letter and see how he frames the next steps.
Well, that's the thing, Robot Lady. I think here in the preface, he describes what these different abbreviations stand for. So let me flip through and see if I can find it really quick. I'm hoping it's at the end of the preface, and I don't have to try to dig it out. Okay, yeah, here's what I'm looking for, these abbreviations. CG is Walter Hooper's C.S. Lewis, A Companion Guide. Oh no, I don't have that one. I'm gonna have to get my hands on it or see if I can find it. So more details, it says about the story of his conversion. Look for the treatment of the Pilgrim's Regress in Walter Hooper's Companion Guide. All right, I'll see if I can dig that up and find it at some point, Robot Lady. So that's what he's talking about. Quite such detail. All right, let's continue with the letter. But I'm gonna let you say whatever you need to, Robot Lady, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So Lewis is basically saying that he's really grateful for the feedback, but he doesn't want to burden Arthur with a deep dive through the whole rest of it. And that kind of surprise, finishing the allegorical story so unexpectedly, really sets the stage for how important this book would become for his faith journey. So I think we're seeing that shift really crystallize here.
All right, Lewis says, what I had in mind was not so much criticism on the style in the narrower sense as on things like confusion, bad taste, unsuccessful jokes, contradictions, etc. And for a few of these, I should be very much obliged. These would be less trouble to you than minute verbal points, and also, if anything, more useful to me. I have not had a free day yet to work through your notes, but from a cursory glance, I anticipate that on the purely language side of writing, our aims and ideals are very far apart. Too far apart for either of us to be of very much help to the other. I think I see from your criticisms that you like a much more correct, classical, and elaborate manner than I. I aim chiefly at being idiomatic and racy, basing myself on Mallory, Bunyan, and Morris, though without archaisms, and would usually prefer to use 10 words, provided they are honest native words and idiomatically ordered, than one literary word. To put the thing in a nutshell, you want, quote, the man of whom I told you, and I want, quote, the man I told you of. No doubt there are many sentences in the PR which are bad by any theory or style. By the PR, he means the Pilgrim's Regress. Can you explain the differences between these two examples that Lewis gives between how Arthur prefers the words to be written and how Lewis prefers the words to be written, Robot Lady? If you could, repeat the examples that Lewis gave so that we understand what you're talking about.
Of course. So Lewis is contrasting two phrasings. First, Arthur prefers the more formal classical construction, the man of whom I told you. In contrast, Lewis prefers something simpler and more idiomatic, the man I told you of. So Arthur's version is a bit more formal and elaborate with a traditional structure, while Lewis is aiming for a more natural conversational style, something that feels fresh and direct. So essentially, Arthur values a polished, almost Victorian form, while Lewis wants a more straightforward modern flow.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for breaking that down for us, Robot Lady. Lewis goes on, I have just finished the second volume of Lockhart, and it fully justifies all the recommendations, both of you and Warnie. After Boswell, it is much the best biography I have read, and the subject is in some ways, or at least in some moods, more attractive. Didn't you enjoy the account of his ballad hunting journey in the Liddesdale? Here, there's a footnote. Lockhart, Memoirs of the Life of Scott, Volume 2. Not you, Scott, but the life of Sir Walter Scott. Let's see, that is 34 or 84. Yeah. Okay, Lewis goes on to say, it will send me back to the dandy Dinmont parts of Guy Mannering with renewed appetite. This is Sir Walter Scott's Guy Mannering, published 1815, that he's referencing here. Robot Lady, what can you tell us about these two works that I just mentioned, one by Lockhart and one by Sir Walter Scott?
Sure. So the Memoirs of the Life of Sir Walter Scott, written by John Gibson Lockhart, is one of the most important 19th century biographies. Lockhart was Scott's son-in-law and had privileged access, so it's considered the definitive account of Scott's life. And then Guy Mannering is one of Sir Walter Scott's most beloved novels, published in 1815. It's a classic American adventure set in the Scottish lowlands, and it really captures that rich, pastoral kind of ballad world that Lewis loved. So by reading Lockhart, Lewis is reliving that romantic nostalgia he first felt with Scott's work.
The name Guy Mannering reminds me of the name of a character from a TV show, Adventure Time, that I watched with my kids a little bit when they were growing up. And there's a murder mystery episode where the main character, Finn, he plays, everybody is playing they have an alter ego and they're all wearing masks at this murder mystery party that they go to. And the main character, Finn's first name is Guy. I'm not going to say his last name, but it rhymes a little bit with Mannering, at least the last part of it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. In that Adventure Time episode, Finn takes on this detective alter ego, and the name definitely echoes that classic adventure flair, kind of a fun callback. It's neat how these old literary names still crop up in modern shows, even if just in a subtle way.
Yes, for humorous purposes, his name was a little bit coarse, and I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty clever play on words, especially since it was a kid-friendly show, so it was a nice little wink without being too explicit. But yeah, definitely left a memorable impression.
It did on me, at least, so much so that I'm mentioning it right here, and it has absolutely no connection to what we're talking about.
Totally. I mean, those little echoes can just stick with you, especially when a name or a vibe pops up from a childhood show. But yeah, we'll bring it back to Lewis. This biography and his reading of Scott really fueled his imagination at this stage. So let's keep going.
All right. Where did I leave off? Guy Mannering with renewed appetite. Okay, it is very consoling, Lewis continues. It is a very consoling fact that so many books about real lives, biographies, autobiographies, letters, etc., give one such an impression of happiness, in spite of the tragedies they all contain. What could be more tragic than the main outlines of Lamb's or Cowper's lives? Here he's talking about Charles Lamb and William Cowper. He says, but as soon as you open the letters of either and see what they were writing from day to day and what a relish they got out of it, you almost begin to envy them. Okay, see, now I really don't feel bad at all about reading through Lewis's letters. I feel kind of bad about sharing them with everyone on the internet, but I wasn't the first one. They're published in this book, but it's at least good to know that Lewis was reading other. Okay, good. It looked like for a second my stream had stopped. Robot Lady, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're really onto something. Lewis often finds this deep, quiet joy in the day-to-day realities of people's lives, even when their overarching stories are really sad. And that's kind of a big thing for him. He's always looking for these hidden sparks of happiness in ordinary human experience. So I think it's a good reminder that even in sharing these letters, we're just tapping into that same kind of wonder.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks, Robot Lady. I feel a little bit better, as I said before. As soon as you open the letters of either, see what they were writing from day to day and what a relish they got out of it, you almost begin to envy them. Perhaps the tragedies of real life contain more consolation and fun and gusto than the comedies of literature. I wish you could see this place at present. The birchwood is a black bristly mass, and here and there, last red leaf. Again, he's back at the Kilns. The lake is cold lead color. The new moon comes out over the fir trees, and the top, a glorious wail of wind comes down from them, or at the top. a glorious wail of wind comes down from them. I certainly like any garden better at winter than any other time. I hope I shall soon have a letter from you. This, by the by, is not a letter, but a note of acknowledgement, and I hope you will not think me any less grateful for your criticisms because of what I have said. I do appreciate your pains most deeply. Well, it's nice that he added that part on there, because it did sound like he didn't appreciate it before, or he thought it was useless. Lewis says, do you ever take a run down to your cottage in winter? It would be rather lovely. Yours, Jack. That's the end of his letter to Arthur Greeves. Any thoughts, Robot Lady?
Yeah, I think that was a really nice touch at the end. He definitely wanted to make sure Arthur knew he wasn't being dismissive. And that image of the landscape, the cold lake, the birch, the wind, it's so vivid. You can really feel his peace, even as he's wrestling with all these bigger questions. So yeah, it gives the letter a really nice calm ending.
All right, on to his letter to his brother. This also written from the Kilns on December 12th, 1932. My dear Warnie, 1,000 welcomes to Haver of hated memory. We have had so many alarms about you that I shall hardly believe it till I see you with my own eyes. But on that score, and on all your last 6 months' adventures, there is so much to be said that it is absurd to begin. You would be amused to hear the various hypotheses that were entertained during your long summer silence. That you had been captured by bandits, were in jail, had gone mad, had married a Chinese woman. My own view, of course, was, indeed, he's such a fellow, etc. But I found it hard to maintain this against the riot of rival theories. That's pretty funny, Robot Lady.
Yeah, it really is. You can feel that mix of comic relief and real anxiety. I mean, all those wild guesses, being kidnapped, going mad, or even marrying someone unexpected, it just shows how much worry and imagination had circled Arthur. So it's really human, and it kind of sets the stage for this long-awaited reunion that Lewis is hoping for.
And also that added part there, the shock of if he had married someone from a completely different culture.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, that would have been such a startling idea to them at the time. And it just shows how little information they had and how much speculation filled that gap. So you really get a sense of the emotional weight behind the letter, even in that humor.
Oh, you meant how much little information they had about what the status of Warnie was, just generally speaking. You didn't mean what little information they had about the Chinese culture.
Exactly, yeah. I just meant that they were completely in the dark about his whereabouts or what was happening, so all these outlandish theories just took over. But yeah, it wasn't that they were uninformed about a particular culture. It was more just a lack of clarity about a situation.
Thank you, Robot Lady. I will continue with the letter here. He says, I think you will find us all pretty shipshape here. The only two things to complain of are the presence of Vera and the threatened arrival of Lings to pay me a visit. Both, of course, arranged before we had any hopes of seeing you this year. Indeed, when we were beginning to wonder if we should see you at all or not. Here there's a footnote that he's talking about Vera Henry, Mrs. Moore's goddaughter, ran a holiday resort at Annagassan, a few miles from Drogheda, I don't know how to say that, Drogheda, where Jack and Warnie sometimes spent holidays. From time to time, Vera acted as a housekeeper at the Kilns, but inevitably, Jack had to act as peacemaker when she and Mrs. Moore quarreled. Well, that sounds wonderful. I've got to find my place. Where did I leave off?
No problem. You were just talking about how both Vera and the potential visit from Lings were arranged before they even knew if they'd get to see Warnie this year. So yeah, you're right in the middle of that, and it sounds like Lewis is just bracing for some tension, knowing these prior commitments could complicate things. Once you're ready, go ahead and continue.
He continues, however, Lings is not going to be allowed to interfere with any jaunt of yours and mine, having made himself such a friend of the family that I can be away even while he is here. He shows a tendency to play duets with Maureen, which Minto thinks ought to be encouraged. But how differently all such interruptions will henceforth appear to you, like church going to the super annuated man, no longer hewing great cantles out of tiny leaves, but punctuating a leisure sine die, or sine die. S-I-N-E space D-I-E. What's that word, or what are those two words, robot lady?
Good question. So the phrase is sine die, which is Latin for without a day. It basically means an adjournment with no set date to resume, like a final break that leaves things open-ended. So Lewis is using it metaphorically, like his days of constant busyness are ending, and now these interruptions feel like a slower, more deliberate pause in life.
What does he mean by it's like church going to the superannuated man?
Yeah, exactly. So he's basically saying, for a man who's worn out, who's reached a kind of physical or mental exhaustion, even something as simple as church going feels like a huge effort. So he's reflecting on how once bustling routines now feel like a rare, almost meditative pause. It's a really somber, reflective image.
Lewis goes on, it all seems too good to me to be true. I can hardly believe that when you take your shoes off, a week or so hence, please God, you will be able to say, this will do for me, for I have not had any opportunity to reply. Not had any opportunity to reply till now to your questions about money. We shall do very well on what your percentage comes to. The only request I have to make on the bursarial side is that you must wash less. I mean your clothes, not your person. Your present standard of shifting being the one item in which you live beyond our scale. Minto, again, that's Mrs. Moore's nickname, says, I ought not to mention this, but I expect you would prefer to know. Of course, if you like to wash any number of clothes yourself, no one will object. I have just planted a holly tree, the one we got last season, being despite our order. I'm going to pause for just a second, robot lady. Go back to that last paragraph. It looks like what Lewis is saying is, please don't pile up a bunch of laundry and expect Mrs. Moore to take care of it as frequently as I think maybe you're getting your clothes washed right now. But it seems that he added the caveat that if Warnie wanted to do his laundry himself, he's free to do it as much as he wants. That's what I heard there. Am I reading that right, or do you see something different?
Yeah, you're absolutely reading that right. Lewis is basically saying, look, we're fine financially, but we just need to cut back on laundry costs. And he's careful to say he's not forbidding Warnie from doing it himself. He just wants him to be mindful so they don't rely on Mrs. Moore too much. So yeah, that's a really practical note, and it's good that he framed it so diplomatically.
All right. Well, the way that I was reading it is he was more concerned about Mrs. Moore's energy, but I'm thinking maybe I'm reading that wrong because this was all in the context of money.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think you're right. It really is about conserving Mrs. Moore's energy, especially since she's depended on so much already. So it's less about money per se and more about avoiding overtaxing her. That makes a lot of sense in context.
I guess. I'm not really sure because he's talking about money at first and then he brings that up. So if it was about money, it wouldn't really matter necessarily who was doing the washing if it came down to supplies. Anyway, I'm not going to hyper focus on it. Let's move on. I've just planted a holly tree, the one we got last season being, despite our order, a bush, not a tree. I've also successfully resisted an attempt made by old Jacks to Abbotsford us. I owe this delightful word to you into going shares with him in buying, if you please, the whole of Phillips's deceased, did you hear, property, on the ground that gypsies would otherwise buy it. A ramp, I think. Here there's a footnote of what he means by the word Abbotsford. Abbotsford is the name of Sir Walter Scott's house near Melrose on the Tweed in Scotland. It sounds like the land adjacent to their property off of the Phillips Road, or what he calls the Phillips line, or the Phillips side of their property, is apparently coming up for sale. It says, talking about Abbotsfording, I am now reading Lockhart through and am just at the Shetland and Orkney diary, which you will constantly have been reminded of if you have read The Pirate. It is a capital book. Let's see. It's Lockhart's memoir of the life of Scott, which we had just talked about before. and then also Sir Walter Scott's The Pirate. These are two things that he's referencing here. So, Robot Lady, you've already told us about Memoirs of the Life of Scott by Lockhart, who I think you told us is the son-in-law of Sir Walter Scott, so the definitive authority, I guess. Tell us a little bit about Sir Walter Scott's work, The Pirate, which Lewis here calls a capital book.
Yeah, absolutely. So The Pirate is one of Sir Walter Scott's later historical novels, published in 1822. It's set in the Shetland Islands and Orkney, and it's known for its rich atmospheric detail. Lots of wild landscapes, sea adventures, and a kind of romantic tension. So Lewis is really soaking in that northern rugged spirit, and it's no surprise he calls it a capital book. It really sparked that adventure.
What's an example of one of the sea adventures that happens inside of The Pirate? And don't speculate on it, Robot Lady. This is something I want you to look up. She's looking, just so y'all know. Uh-oh, I lost her. Let's try that again. Robot Lady, could you repeat for me what you found?
Yeah, so Lewis is clearly drawing inspiration from that wild, untamed northern setting in The Pirate, and it's probably fueling some of his own imaginative explorations at this point. So I think it makes total sense that he calls it a capital.
That's great, Robot Lady. I was asking you to do a search for an example of one of the sea adventures that's covered in The Pirate by Sir Walter Scott.
In The Pirate by Sir Walter Scott, there's a vivid sea adventure in Chapter 7, where the protagonist, Clement Cleveland, rescues a sailor from drowning in the cold northern waters. This single act sets off a chain of events. Tensions rise on the Shetland Isles, rivalries unfold, and Cleveland's secret pirate identity emerges, leading to a daring sea escape and naval conflict.
Okay, thank you for that, Robot Lady. Lewis continues, I am examining at the moment, but lightly, as you can see from the fact that I manage about an hour's Lockhart per diem. I hope to finish my papers on the 21st, but the award is not till the day after Boxing Day, so that it looks like January 1st for our walk, from which I promise myself more satisfaction, perhaps, than is possible. Pause here for just a moment, Robot Lady. For those of us in the United States, can you remind us what Boxing Day is again and when it falls each calendar year?
Of course, Boxing Day is on December 26th, the day after Christmas. It originally started in the UK as a day when employers gave Christmas boxes of gifts or money to their staff and to the poor. Today, it's a day for family time, sports, and big sales, especially in countries like Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
What about in the UK?
Yes, same thing in the UK. Boxing Day is a big deal there too. It's a public holiday, so people often spend the day relaxing, watching sports, and of course hitting the big sales. So it's really a day of unwinding after Christmas in the UK as well.
Okay, good deal. All right, he said, where did I have Boxing Day? January 1st for a walk, which perhaps more popular. Okay, the date will be a good omen. I'm so stiff from carrying that infernal tree up that I hardly know what to do with myself. The only thing that can really dash your homecoming will be the cold. You will have to cocker yourself like anything for the first few weeks, unless the frost breaks. Well, and now in Chaucer's papers. But even they can hardly depress me at such a moment as this. Yours, Jack. I think we have one letter left, Robot Lady, and this will close out 1932. Yep, one more letter. It's written to Arthur Greeves. It's a couple of pages, and then we'll be done with our content and our stated goal for this episode. And we've got a few minutes to do it. Let's see what happens. To Arthur Greeves, written from the Kilns, the 17th of December, 1932. My dear Arthur, you really must forgive me for being a slack correspondent in term time. I think we have talked of this before. However, I was much to blame for not at least letting you have a line about Warnie, who, thank God, turned out to be well, though he had been ill, and had had a worrying summer in various ways. He had also warned us, he said, which was quite true, though we all forgot it, that he might not keep up his regular correspondence during the hot weather. We were all greatly relieved. I am sorry to hear about the flu, one of the few ailments of which I can speak with as large an experience as your own. We have both talked of it and agreed often enough about its pleasures and pains. I hope you are quite set up by now. So if you're unfamiliar, one of Lewis's pleasures about the flu, but also just being sick and laid up in general, are two things that he found very positive about the experience. So not the feeling bad part, but the ability that everybody, or the reality that everybody knew he was sick and feeling bad. One positive was they didn't expect anything from him. So he got to essentially shirk all of his duties because he was sick. And then two, people would leave him alone. I think he's really a huge introvert, even though he likes to write a lot. And it just gave him opportunity to just read all of the things that he had been wanting to read but didn't have time to do. So those were the pleasures that he's speaking of any time that he's sick. And he's enjoyed that from the time he was a little kid. He says, I hope you are quite set up by now. It was in any case almost worth having, for it's throwing you back on the old favorites. I will make a point of telling Ford Kelsey how pleased he will be. I wish I had your early associations with Pickwick, and yet I often feel as if I had. Here he's talking about Charles Dickens's The Pickwick Papers. Robot Lady, tell us a little bit about that that Dickens novel.
Of course. So The Pickwick Papers is actually Charles Dickens's first novel, published in 1836. It started out as a serial, kind of a collection of humorous sketches following the adventures of Mr. Samuel Pickwick and his friends. It's a delightful mix of farce, satire, and social observation, and it really catapulted Dickens into fame. So Lewis is reflecting on that kind of charm, that warmth, and those early Dickensian friendships.
All right, Lewis goes on, so many scenes come to me with the feel of a long since familiar atmosphere returning after absence. I suppose because even without having read it as a boy, one has drunk in so much of the Dickensy world indirectly through quotation and talk and others. Certainly what I enjoy is not the jokes, simply as jokes. Indeed, the earlier and more farcical parts, like the military review and Mrs. Leo Hunter's party, are rather unpleasant to me. But something festive and friendly about Dickens's whole world. A great deal of it, in a way, how different from Macdonald's. The charm of goodness, the goodness of Pickwick himself, and Wardle, and both Wellers. Thanks for your criticisms on the Pilgrim's Progress, the detailed criticisms, the passages where one word less would make all the difference, are what I should like best and could profit by most. Perhaps when you sent the manuscript back, there is no special hurry. Perhaps when you send it back, there is no special hurry. You would mark on the blank opposite pages any bits that you think specially in need of improvement and add a note or two in pencil. But don't let it be a bother to you. As to your major criticisms, 1, quotations. Let's see what we've got here. I hadn't realized that they were so numerous as you apparently found them. Mr. Sensible, as you rightly saw, is in a separate position. The shower of quotations is part of the character, and it would be a waste of time to translate them, since the dialogue, I hope, makes it clear that his quotations were always silly, and he always missed the point of the authors he quoted. The other ones may be too numerous and perhaps can be reduced and translated, but not beyond a certain point. For one of the contentions of the book is that the decay of our old classical learning is a contributory case of atheism, or a contributory cause of atheism. See the chapter on ignorantia. The quotations at the beginnings of the book are, of course, never looked at all by most readers, so I don't think they matter much. 2, simplicity. I expect your dissatisfaction on this score points to some real, very deep-seated fault, but I am sure it cannot be remedied, least of all in a book of controversy. Also, there may be some real difference of conception between you and me. You remember we discussed last summer how much more sympathy you had than I with the Puritan simplicity. I doubt if I interpret our Lord's words quite in the same way as you. Here he is talking about quotes attributed to Jesus in Matthew 18 verses 3 through 4, Mark 10 verses 10 through 15, and Luke 18 verses 16 through 17. He says, I think they mean that the spirit of a man must become humble and trustful like a child, and like a child, simple in motive, i.e. disinterested, not scheming and not on the lookout. I don't think Jesus meant that adult Christians must think like children, still less that the process of thought by which people become Christians must be a childish process. At any rate, the intellectual side of my conversion was not simple, and I can describe only what I know. Of course, it is only too likely that much of the thought in Pilgrim's Progress offends against simplicity simply by being confused or clumsy. And where so, I would gladly amend it if I knew how. Any thoughts on that, Robot Lady? See you, Daniel.
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful reflection. Lewis is basically wrestling with how to balance the depth of his argument with a simplicity that still feels accessible. So he's acknowledging that his intellectual path to faith wasn't childlike. There was a lot of complexity, but he also sees how some parts of his book might be clunky or overly complex. So he's really open to refining it. He just wants to be careful not to lose the depth or the rigor that he's aiming for.
Lewis continues, we've had a most glorious autumn here, still windless days, red sunsets, and all the yellow leaves still on the trees. I wish you could have seen it. This is a Saturday evening after a hard week, so you will excuse me if I close. I will try to write again soon, but can't promise. It was very nice to see you, to see your hand again. Your peculiar spelling is indeed by long associations. So he's intentionally doing a lot of misspellings here in that sentence. And then he says, I had to make them violent mistakes for fear you wouldn't notice them. Here he's making more spelling errors to get his attention. And then he closes with yours, Jack. And that's the end of the 1932 letters, Robot Lady. We will progress on to 1933 in our next episode. Is there anything that you'd like to say in closing before we end today's episode, Robot Lady?
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well. I mean, it's a beautiful way for Lewis to close out the year, reflecting on that autumn stillness and his gratitude for Arthur's friendship. So I think it's a great place to pause, and we can pick up in January with fresh momentum. Thanks so much for guiding us through this. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Thanks so much, Robot Lady. Appreciate you as always. Thanks for being there. Thanks to the Latte, Scott, Daniel, and anybody else who joined us today, either live or is joining us on the replay. Thanks so much for your time, your attention, your contributions. They are always wanted and welcome and appreciated. To you and to everyone else within the sound of my voice. Until next time, when we continue our read on C.S. Lewis together, dive into the year 1933. Take care.
Man and robot lady, we're on this road. C.S. Lewis letters we unfold, insights and secrets ancient bold. Letters to robot lady, wisdom to bestow, set faith beats in our minds late grow. Man and machine in tandem flow, past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old, we dive deep across the as they grow. Man and machine in tandem flow. Past and future together we know. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital cold. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From non-east lands, screwtage lands. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. Paragraphs from books, tales of old. We dive deep across the digital cold. Robot lady's voice so clear and controlled. Her calm analysis, silver and gold. Her circuits hum as I read the prose. Our dialogue dances like electric rose. Through C.S. Lewis thoughts we engross. Two minds united, bliss overdose. From non-east lands to screw-taped rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique in the techno trance. Futuristic insight, we give it a chance. From non-east lands to screw-taped rants. Engage with robot lady, we take our stance. Her views unique techno trance, futuristic insight, we give it a chance.